Hello, everyone. Hope you all been well. Today on Ghost Travelers podcast, we'll be talking with Jim Harold. Jim is a full-time podcaster, and his show is called the Paranormal Podcast. Jim has been doing the Paranormal Podcast since 2005. Today, Jim will talk about how he got into the paranormal field and also how he started his podcast shows. So please join us on this journey with Jim. Jim, thank you for coming on Ghost Travelers podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, sir, for having me on the program. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. If you could, can you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into the paranormal field?
Well, I am a full-time pro paranormal podcaster. I've been podcasting on the paranormal since 2005 and full-time since 2012. And basically, I got into the paranormal as a young kid watching In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy and then Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. And I was always fascinated, and I always had this sense there was something more to do with life and reality than we realized. So I was always interested in it, and I looked to start a podcast when I first heard about them back in 2005, thought it would be fun, and really did it just as a hobby. Because I'd gone to school for broadcasting, but ended up working in advertising, in radio, but not on air. And I thought, I'll do this for fun. And lo and behold, people started to enjoy it, and I enjoyed the topic, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew. So really, the paranormal, I've been into the paranormal way before I did anything with podcasting. As a kid, I loved it. I'd go to the library, bookstore, go right to that shelf with all the paranormal books. It was always too small. And just have always been fascinated by it. And the interesting thing is, PJ, after 15 years of doing these podcasts, over 2,000 episodes, I'm still fascinated by it. And I think I always will be.
Yeah, same here. I've been investigating the paranormal since the fall of 2009, and I've always, and still to this day, me and my dad still go out and investigate the paranormal because we are so fascinated by what's out there that we cannot see.
Yeah, yeah. It is really, it's kind of, I've had this discussion with many people who, whether they're authors or podcasters or just people interested or investigators, they say the same story. Kind of once you get into this subject, it's kind of like, you probably don't remember this, but there used to be an old commercial for something called the Roach Motel. Roaches get in and they don't come out. Well, that's like the paranormal as a subject. Once you start looking into it, rarely do people walk away from it and say, I'm not interested in that anymore. You pretty much, once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, that is true. And sometimes paranormal groups leave the field because they really haven't really experienced anything that's truly paranormal. You know, they don't get to see the full body apparition, or see a shadow figure, or hear the voices. And sometimes they leave, and sometimes they stick to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, everybody's experience is different, and I respect everybody's experience. I have had a few people say, people, the members of my Plus Club or things, hey, I'm not into this topic anymore. It happens, but not often, at least in my experience.
Yeah, so before you started your podcast and before you seen all these commercials while you were a young boy, have you ever had a personal experience yourself that truly got you on the path of the paranormal field?
Well, honestly, I have kind of different experiences. Some people experience seeing ghosts or those kind of things. I have more kind of subtle things happen. First of all, there's some great family experiences, too, that have been related to me that I believe have kind of set me on this path from a very young age. However, I'll share one thing that happened with you. It's not a traditional ghost story, but it did stick in my mind. I was probably about 18 years old, or 17 or 18 years old, and I'm from Ohio. I was born and raised here. My family's from West Virginia. So I was visiting down in West Virginia and walking and talking with a young lady there one day, nice young lady who lived down there, and we were having a nice chat and walking along, and we walked past this large truck, a log truck. If you're familiar, PJ, these big trucks that carry these long logs for lumber companies and things. and there was a big stack of lumber on it, huge stack of lumber, secured by chains. And I remember walking past that, and in my head I got this thought, hey, you better get away from this truck. And so I kind of quickened my pace a little bit and came out on the other end. The girl was on the other side, so we met at the end and kept walking and talking. I didn't think much about it for about, 10 yards. And then I heard a big rumble behind me. I turned around, and every log on that truck had fallen off on the side I was walking. And that was like, I kind of considered that precognition, which some people consider to be paranormal. And I've had other similar things happen in kind of odd after-death communications, but not directly. They're very subtle usually, or there's a lot of weird events that happen. So I don't have the typical paranormal experience, like I saw a ghost, a full-figure ghost, or something like that. But I do have a lot of these little strange happenings, which I think a lot of people have. And I really do think the nature of reality is so much different than we assume. And that's why I love doing shows like the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire.
So when you had that first experience, the pre-hypnotic experience that you were just talking about, how soon afterwards have you experienced another one?
Actually, the next thing that happened to me, and this was I've had a couple of near misses, and again, maybe not traditionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Not traditionally supernatural, but things that I think hinted at some kind of precognition or guardian angel situation. Another situation. I was in my mid-20s, and I was dating who is now my wife, but we weren't even engaged at the time. And out here, I live in northeastern Ohio in the Cleveland area. And there's a big amusement park here called about an hour outside of Cleveland or a little more, called Cedar Point. Very famous roller coaster park. And I worked at a radio station in their ad department, and I got some free tickets to Cedar Point. So we went to Cedar Point. Me, my future wife, Dar, and 4 friends. And we went, and we had a great time, and I dropped her home very late. It was about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And she lived with her folks then because she was in graduate school. And she said, I had to go back about a half hour to my apartment. I had to get on the freeway and go about a half hour to get back where I was living at the time. And she said, Jim, you really need to come in and sleep on the couch. I'll ask my dad, it'll be innocent and everything. We'll just ask my dad if you can sleep on the couch. And I said, great. Well, I didn't say great. I actually said, no, I'm not going to do that. We'd only been dating a few months. I didn't really know her family that well. I felt very awkward. And she said, no, I insist. And as usual, she got her way, and she asked her dad, and I slept on the couch. The next day I came back to my house, which was in a kind of working-class neighborhood, but at that time it was not a terrible neighborhood. It later became worse, but it was in the city of Cleveland. She lived in the suburbs. And I lived in the front of an A-frame house. And the landlord's son lived in the back. So he comes out, and he's pointing at the house as I pull up, talking to a neighbor. And I get out of the car, and I'm in a good mood. I had a nice breakfast with the family. Even then, I could tell this was the direction I was heading in, that we were destined to be together. So I was happy. And I came out, how you doing? It's a nice Sunday. He's like, we've got to talk. There's been a drive-by. I'm like, where's there been a drive-by? What are you talking about? Whose house got hit? Our house got hit. I guess somebody had pulled up about 3 o'clock in the morning with an AK-47 and fired about 6 rounds into the house.
Oh, wow.
And apparently they got the wrong house. Our house was dark blue. The house next to us was light blue under the street lights. Our house looked blue. Their house looked white. They hit the wrong house. So, long story short, I thought a guardian angel was looking out for me that day. So, I believe these things happen. I have later situations where I had kind of indirect after-death communication, things that I interpreted it as after-death communication from loved ones. So, there's always been a thread. My family, my mom and dad, my mom's passed, unfortunately, but they both told, and my dad still tells a story about a strange UFO encounter in the early 70s. And the thing is that it's kind of been a thread through my life. But I'm not someone who sees, some people see ghosts and spirits all the time. I can't really say that I ever think I've seen a ghost or a spirit yet, but there's still time, hopefully.
So, when your wife mentioned to you saying, "Hey, I'd rather you stay here before you drive an hour and a half," did she got it like a sixth sense or something that something is about to happen at your
I
house?
think so, but she interpreted it as I was going to fall asleep, which I could have. I was very, very tired. If anybody's gone to one of those parks, even when you're young, if you go at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning and you stay till they close till midnight or whatever, you're tired. So her fear was I would fall asleep, but maybe something or someone put that in her mind as a warning to just get her to, because I'm sure she wasn't thinking my place was going to get shot up. It wasn't like I lived in what was considered to be a horrible neighborhood. It was certainly, a neighborhood that was undergoing some challenges, but even the police supposedly were shocked when they got there and saw all this. So, yeah, somebody was looking out for me, PJ.
Yeah, I'm glad that she said something for you can still be here and have this great paranormal podcast that you share around the world.
Yeah, and the thing is I love sharing, as unique as I thought that story was, I've heard so many unique stories over the years. Stories that just, some of the thing about, for example, Jim Harold's Campfire, which is my most popular show, and that's where people come on and tell their stories of spooky things that have happened to them. Really, I love sharing stories because you get everything from something that's very heartwarming to a message from a past loved one, a parent, a grandparent, that sort of thing, a spouse, to, stories like mine, kind of like guardian angel stories, to, horribly terrifying stories, or just stories that are kind of like something ripped out of the Twilight Zone. So there's all kinds of unique stories out there, and I love to be a place where people can share those stories, knowing that they won't be judged, and we're very open to hearing everybody's story and sharing it.
Yeah, that's how me and my dad started a Ghost Travelers podcast. For there's a safe environment for people can share their paranormal stories. So, how far, if somebody has not heard about your paranormal podcast, can you tell us a little bit about it and how you came on producing it?
Okay. Well, Jimmy Harold's Campfire was started in 2009. That's kind of my ghost story, spooky story podcast. But before that, and it still continues to this day, I have another show called The Paranormal Podcast. And PGA, that kind of tells you how early I started this, because the name The Paranormal Podcast was available in 2005. So, and I actually have the registered trademark on that, The Paranormal Podcast. So, it's kind of funny. I got, the name. And basically the idea behind that show was, I had grown up, I had always been a talk radio fan. And I always enjoyed when there were great radio hosts like Larry King, and then later on, it wasn't when I was a kid, but later on, of course, the late great Art Bell and people like that did interviews with these authors and so forth. And, I looked in the podcast space, and I think there might have been one show doing that at the time, or there wasn't much. And I said, you know what if I just, I'm not an expert, I'm a fellow seeker, but I can ask questions. I don't know anything. I mean, I didn't know anything but what I read. I wasn't an expert, and I don't even consider myself an expert today after 2,200 shows. But I can certainly ask questions. So I started inviting these great guests on, and most of them at the beginning, is what is a podcast? But, I had some great people who accepted, and we kind of built an audience, and that was just the idea, to do a talk show based on the paranormal and interview these great authors and experts and so forth about their theories. And then let the audience decide, PJ. I don't say, this is the right theory, this is the wrong theory. I like to bring the experts on, let them present their research, their writing, and then let the audience decide.
Yeah, most definitely. So with your paranormal podcast, was there like one of your most favorite guests have you ever had on the show so far?
Probably my two most favorite guests are unfortunately no longer with us. The late, great Brad Steiger, who wrote, I don't know how many books, probably 100 books on the paranormal or close to it. And he had been writing since the 50s. And if you haven't read his work, I recommend highly looking at Brad Steiger. He was tremendous. Another person who we just lost a couple of years ago was Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who did work on ghosts, the jinn, communicating with the dead, just witchcraft. I mean, she did books on everything. And she was just so fascinating, such a nice person. And we unfortunately lost her 2 years ago. And she was my favorite all-time guest, probably because she was on the show 20 times. And then current guests that I really enjoy, and I probably will miss some people here, PJ, but I love having Ryan Sprague on. He is a UFO expert, and he's a younger guy, and he's does a lot of TV and stuff, and writes and has his own podcast, Somewhere in the Skies. He's great, Ryan Sprague. Nick Redfern, who's kind of picked up that mantle of Brad Steiger, and he puts out 2 or 3 books every year on the supernatural, and he talks about everything from chupacabra to ghosts to, we just did a show on time travel that'll be airing probably in November. Nick Redfern is fantastic. So we're blessed. I've been very blessed with having just some tremendous, tremendous guests over the years.
So for a short amount of time that we have left together, Jim, and since it's Halloween coming up like next weekend, do you have any of your favorite spooky stories from your campfire side that you would like to share?
Oh, yes. I would like to share the Roadhouse Saloon story. It's a little more involved, but hopefully your fans will find it interesting. This is, and I thought so highly of the story actually before the pandemic. I went up to the upper Midwest and interviewed the person who did this and did it on video as well on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Jim Harold, by the way. But this is called the Roadhouse Saloon, and this is about my caller, T.I. She and a friend were up in Wisconsin, and they went to see a band play. She was visiting the area. So they stayed late until the bar where this band was playing closed. So it was after 2 o'clock. So they left, I think, about 2:30 because they were talking with the band. It was her and her friend Bob. And they had about an hour to go to where she was staying. So they got about halfway into the trip back home, and T.I. mentions to Bob, hey, the call of nature is upon me. And he says, well, there's not much out here. There's some bushes. And she says, drive fast, drive fast. So anyway, they're going down the road, and they see this bar. And the joint is jumping. The neon signs are on. There's cars in the parking lot. You can kind of hear the muffled sounds of music. And they're thinking, well, this is not right. This is like 3 o'clock in the morning or later. All the bars are closed at this time, but they thought, well, you know what? Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. Let's go in. T.I. can answer the call of nature. And Bob said, well, I'm actually interested to go in there because I heard there's this cool Old West mural on the wall. And he's an artist. Bob was an artist. So they went in, and T.I. went to the restroom, and Bob got a couple drinks from the bar. And they were sitting down talking and looking at this big Western mural that was like something out of a cowboy movie. And they kept talking, and they noticed something weird, that the people in the painting were the same live people in the bar. Like the bartender was this big burly guy, handsome-looking guy, but in the thing he was a cowboy. And there were some women sitting at the end of the bar, but they were like what they used to call dance hall girls in the painting. It was weird. And they started talking about it, and they're like, well, there's a simple explanation for that. You know, this is basically a an homage to the people who were here, their regulars, and the artist just incorporated them in the painting, which made sense. Then things even got weirder. Some guy walks up to T.I. and smiles, and he has like a mouthful of rotten teeth, and he asks T.I., do you want to dance? And she says no. She has a cane because she walks with a cane and shows him. He said, no, thank you. And she said she was glad she had that cane. And then the guy goes over to like this classic Wurlitzer jukebox with like the bubbler on it and puts on Chubby Checker's Let's Twist Again. Let's Twist Again like we did last summer. And then, things really start to get weird. They're looking at this painting and they notice a couple of double doors, like the swinging doors that, in the old Western movies, you go in and the guy come in and say, I want to see the sheriff. I want to have a showdown, So anyway, they noticed something they didn't notice originally that wasn't there. They noticed like two misty figures, like two columns of smoke almost. One was taller than the other, in the doorway where those doors were in the painting. I thought that was weird. So they talked a little more and they looked back and it looked like they were actually developing into the picture, like a Polaroid picture, and they were a little more formed, and it was a man and a woman. And they talked some more and they're like, that's weird. Then they looked back and it was a man and a woman, and the woman was significantly shorter than the man. T.I. was significantly shorter than Bob. Then T.I. noticed this, and this was the clincher. The woman had curly hair and boots, and T.I. had curly hair and boots. And, oh, by the way, the woman had a cane. And then T.I. knew that woman was her in the painting.
Wow.
And the man was Bob. And they decided, let's get out of here, which is a logical thing to do, PJ. So they got out. T.I. said that they closed the door, and as they were going out, the people were like motioning, come back, come back. And then they closed the door, and then once they closed the door, T.I. said there was like a black void, and also the whole place went silent, like it was closed, like it had never been opened. They turn around, there aren't cars in the parking lot, there's one car, their car. So they say, let's get out of here. Now, PJ, if I told you that was the end of the story, I think you'd agree that was a pretty wild story. But it gets wilder. So T.I. is much braver than I am. She decides to go back. And she goes back with a friend. It might have been her sister. I can't remember. A couple days later, she does go at about 8 o'clock at night. She doesn't wait until 3 o'clock in the morning. She walks in, and there's a young woman in her 20s behind the bar. And she says, hey, I was here the other night, And the Western painting is still on the wall. But she, by the way, she's not in the painting anymore in the doors. And she's talking to this woman bartender, and she says, I was in here the other night. There was this big, burly, strapping, good-looking bartender, and she was describing some of the people, and she said, there's no bartender like that who works here. The only bartender other than me that works here is my elderly father. And gee, I thought, boy, that's weird. Then she went over to the jukebox. Well, two things. One, the jukebox was not an old-time Wurlitzer with the bubbler and the records inside. It was a modern CD jukebox. And then, guess what? No Chubby Checker, no Let's Twist Again. It wasn't anywhere to be found in the contents of the jukebox. And with that, T.I. said, I've seen enough, and she left, and she's never been back since. And not only that, EJ, I can tell you the place really exists, and the painting really exists, because we've had people who have gone and sent us pictures.
Oh, wow. So do you think that you believe that they somehow kind of transported back in time a little bit, like the environment and the atmosphere was just right, and they entered like a time loop effect?
Well, I don't know if it was a time loop as much as it might have been some kind of alternate universe or something. Because, things were the same, but they were a little bit different, and that's why I've heard about this idea of the multiverse. That's why I think, PJ, I do believe in ghosts, and I believe that our past loved ones try to contact us, but I think there's something else going on, too. And I think we live in a very strange world, and that it's much more complex than we give it credit for. So Do I think it could have been a time loop? Maybe, but I think it's just as likely it could have been kind of somehow, like you said, the conditions were just right, and they kind of stumbled on a paranormal, or maybe a paranormal, but a parallel universe that they almost became a part of.
Yeah, that's crazy. And also, me and my dad also kind of went that direction of kids. If you think about it, sometimes you run it across with some spirits that they don't even know what era they're in. Like sometimes they see us on the other
Right.
side and they think we're the ghost and we're haunting them, and
Yes.
sometimes the other way around, you know?
Yep. Yep. That's exactly right. I do. But I absolutely believe that's a possibility too. And we've had stories like that. We had I'll just quickly share with you because I know you're short on time. But we had one where a young man said that when he was a little boy, he was in his family home, and he was going through the hallway, and he passed his kitchen door, and he saw like a hooded figure, and it looked like the hooded figure was making a peanut butter sandwich. And he always thought that was weird as a little kid, like, who was that? And he ran away right away because he scared it. Didn't know who it was. Then, when he was a teenager, he was in the kitchen wearing a hoodie, minding his own business, making a peanut butter sandwich, and he looked down and he saw this little, what looked like a shadow of a little boy running in the hallway.
Wow.
Now, is that a mind blower or what?
No, most definitely. That sure is. Like he was like peering through the future a little bit.
Yeah, and the past. Maybe all these things exist at the same time. It's kind of like, they're on parallel tracks, and sometimes we jump the track and we see what's in the other track. It's like a record almost.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Jim, I would really like to say thank you so much for coming on the Ghost Travelers podcast today. Do you have like a website or anything? And I know you have your paranormal podcast. Can you do like a? Is there like a link people can go to them and checking them out
Oh,
themselves?
absolutely. Absolutely. I suggest going to jimharold.com. That's JIMHAROLD.com. They'll find all the free podcasts there. In addition, if they listen on a podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, wherever they listen on, the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire, if you search for either or both of those or just my name, Jim Harold, I will come up. And I hope your listeners get to check in because kind of like you, PJ, everybody now gets excited about Halloween, but a lot of people go away. But people like you and me are producing the content every week. So for us, it's Halloween 365 days a year. So if your folks love spooky stuff, I hope they'll check it out at jimharold.com and on their favorite podcast app.
Yeah, most definitely. And the links that you just mentioned, I'll put in the bottom of the description of this episode for my listeners and new listeners can check out your site a lot easier to navigate.
Thank you, PJ. It's been an honor and a privilege.
You're most welcome. Well, everyone, this is PJ with the Ghost Travelers Podcast. Take care and travel safe.